What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm Pat and today we're going to be talking about survival kits and what you should have in your kit should you ever find yourself in an emergency survival situation. So stick around to make sure that you're prepared. A lot of people have an "it can't happen to me" mentality, but search and rescue is deployed on thousands of missions every year to find missing people. So it can happen to anybody, and we can't really prevent these situations from happening, but we can definitely be prepared if they ever do happen. So if you ever do find yourself in a survival situation, there are 4 things that you must obtain in order to survive, and they are shelter, water, fire, and food. In order to obtain these 4 elements of survival, there are 5 types of tools that you must have in your kit. And they are the 5 C's of survival. They would be cutting tools, combustion devices, cover, cordage, and container. Alright, let's start off with our cutting tools. Knives. Knives should be your primary cutting tool. I like to carry 2 on me at all times because 2 is 1 and 1 is none. Now when selecting a knife for the bush to put in your kit, make sure that you get a full tang knife, meaning that the blade and the handle are all one fixed piece. That'll make sure that you have a good quality, reliable tool in the bush. This can be used for processing wood, finer tasks like whittling, crafting other items. This has endless uses in the bush if you're ever lost, so make sure you have a good quality knife. This is just a little neck knife. I like to keep this with me as well, just in case for some reason I ever do lose this. I shouldn't, because it's always going to be attached to my person, but it's always good to have a backup. This is a full tang blade as well. The next type of cutting tool that I always like to carry in my pack with me is going to be a folding saw. If you're ever lost, you're probably going to have to process some wood to get a fire going, or maybe even build a shelter, and although a knife will help you process wood, it won't do it quite like a saw will. So for the weight and the size, definitely worth having in your pack. The second C of survival is combustion devices. Now nearly everybody has a lighter on them, but they can run out of fluid, they can get wet and damp, and you won't be able to get them dry sometimes. So they do fail at points, but they are definitely the first line of defense when it comes to combustion devices. Secondly, I always carry my Ferro Rod. This will always throw a good hot spark, doesn't matter if it's wet, if it's dry, or what. It'll always throw a good spark. And inside the Ferro Rod, I have some cotton batten that is soaked in Vaseline. That makes a waterproof tinder. So even if that gets wet, it will still light because the Vaseline is waterproofing it, while the cotton itself is still very flammable. And as a third line of defense, I always bring waterproof matches. These are stormproof and windproof as well, and they strike anywhere. These are very, very good to have. And for $3 or $4, they're definitely worth the investment. Your combustion devices are very important because they provide you solely with an element of survival, which is fire. So never skimp on those, always make sure you have plenty. Always make sure you have a backup for your backup. The third C of survival is cover. Cover is something that's going to keep us protected from the elements. Now of course our first line of cover is going to be our clothing. So make sure that you pay attention to the weather, make sure you pay attention to the forecast, and dress appropriately for your climate and the conditions. Secondly, you're probably going to want to keep a tarp or a poncho or even a Mylar Bivy bag with you at all times. That's something that will provide shelter. These Mylar Bivy bags are great. They're reflective, they will retain a lot of body heat. The only thing is they're small. There are Silnylon tarps like this. This is 5x7. It doesn't have any reflective properties to it, so it's not as good as, say, the Bivy or this reflective all-weather blanket. But nonetheless, you can make a shelter out of this. You can make multiple types of shelters out of this. Something that's highly recommended is a reflective all-weather blanket. Not only will this reflect a lot of body heat, it's fairly large. I think it's 5x7 as well. So you can build shelters out of this that will reflect your body heat. And you can also use it for signaling because it is reflective. Another option is a Tarp Poncho. This one here is, I believe, 6x6. It's got the hood in the middle, and it's got snaps down each side. It's got grommets on each corner as well. So you could build a shelter out of it using the grommets. You could use it as a mattress to stuff full of leaves or boughs or needles to keep you up off the ground and then button it shut. Or you could just straight wear it as a poncho to keep you protected from the elements. Now, if you're not into buying any of this stuff, even if you want to bring a heavy duty garbage bag with you, just something you could string up to keep the rain off you or whatever it may be. So, although that obviously isn't the best option, if that's what you want to do, if it works, it works. Our fourth C of survival is cordage. If you need to build a shelter, if you need to combine two items, chances are you're going to need cordage. Trying to forage for it is going to be an absolute pain. You're going to have to try to find a bunch of roots and vines and tie them all together, and it's a lot of energy that you should be spending on shelter, fire, water, and food. I always carry paracord on me. It's my favorite thing to use. Paracord 550. There is Titan Paracord that has a fishing line and a snare wire all the way through it. That's highly recommended by a lot of people for obvious reasons. Number 36, bank line as well is a good choice. It doesn't take up nearly as much room and it's got a break strength of 340 pounds. So that's always a very viable option as well if you don't want to take the extra weight or space that paracord takes up. The fifth C of survival is containers. You need a good steel container, something that's single wall, or a good steel pot or titanium pot or aluminum pot. Something that you can carry water in, something that you can transport things in. The reason it's got to be single wall steel or aluminum or titanium, whatever it may be, is because you need to be able to put this directly in the fire. The reason for that being you need a way to get safe water to drink. And the most effective way to completely purify water is by boiling it. If you have a Nalgene bottle, for instance, yes, that's great for collecting water, but that's not good for boiling water. So make sure that you have a fireproof container that you can put water in, that you can put directly into the fire and not have to worry about it, to make sure that you always have good clean water to drink. So these here 5 types of tools, the 5 C's of survival, you should be able to obtain shelter, water, fire, and at least help you cook food. If not, process food or help collect food. These items will assist you in finding the 4 elements necessary to survive until you are rescued or can perform self-rescue. Now, it's one thing to have all of these items, but it's another thing to know how to actually use them. So don't just throw these in your kit and never have used them before in your life, because when you actually need them, they're not going to be any good to you because you don't have the knowledge to use them. You don't have the skill level built up. So make sure that you get out there and you actually practice with your gear. Get out there on field days. Go out and just practice with your Ferro Rod, or practice tying knots, or practice building shelters. Point is to make sure you get out and actually use your gear. That way you are proficient with it when you actually need it in the field. Without the knowledge to use this gear properly, the tools are no good to you. So make sure you actually get out and use your gear. So now that we've covered the 5 main C's of survival, let's talk about some other items that I like to bring that will not only prolong your survival, but it also make you more comfortable. They're not very heavy, they don't take up a whole lot of space, and they could really be the difference between life and death. I always bring my med kit with me. Always, always. I never go into the bush without it. You never know what can happen out there. We're prepared for being lost. Why not be prepared for being injured? Chances are we'll be injured before we're lost. Next, I always like to bring a little bit of food with me. This only weighs maybe 2 pounds. It's got rice. It's got trail mix, protein cookies, Mr. Noodles, some coffee, crackers. That's enough to sustain you for a few days. So for the amount of weight and space that it takes up, take some food with you. Now, I always bring my life straw and aqua tabs with me whenever I go out in the bush. Because maybe sometimes you're not going to have time to sit there and build a fire, or you're not going to be able to find the materials necessary to build a fire in order to purify your water. Next item that I always bring with me is going to be kindling devices. I'll always bring my headlamp whenever I'm out in the woods at night. This comes in great, keeps your hands free. This even has the red light settings, that way you don't lose your night vision. And I always bring a second kindling device as well, just a regular flashlight. Because again, 2 is 1 and 1 is none. Something else that I highly recommend you keep in your kit is going to be Gorilla Tape. Not only can you repair tarps with it, well, you can you can repair anything. It's duct tape. But seriously though, like you can fix anything that's got that's supposed to be waterproof, that's got a leak, like your tarp. Throw a couple pieces over it. You can mend clothing. You can use it in first aid situations, and it's also highly flammable. If you rip it into little shards, it'll take a spark from that ferro rod or that lighter, and it'll burn for a few minutes while you actually get a fire going. So it's great, great fire starter as well. And lastly, just as a creature comfort, I always bring my little mini isobutane can and my pocket burner. That I mainly bring this as my container, and everything fits snugly in there. So if you're ever really cold and you don't have the energy to build a fire, or again you may not be able to find the materials to build a fire, this is always good to have on hand, because if you're really cold and you need something warm to drink, if you're borderline hypothermic, this could possibly save your life. So besides being a creature comfort, it's also very, very handy to have. My last creature comfort is a sit pad, because I know I don't like being wet, because that leads to being cold, and if you're in a survival situation, being wet and cold is deadly. It slides right in the back of my backpack, and you don't even know it's there, and keeps your butt dry, keeps your knees dry, keeps you warm and dry. Alright guys, well that's everything covered. 5 C's of survival. Remember that they're going to be cutting tools, combustion device, cover, cordage, and container. With those 5 basic items, you should be able to survive until you're rescued, or you can perform self-rescue. So thanks for watching guys. As always, I appreciate you, and until next time, take care.